Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be painting up the Primus from the Gene Stealer cult. We're going to be doing a relatively quick and simple paint job. I forgot to get the actual picture of the priming process, but I always prime with the same thing. Bright Touch Gray Car Primer, and I assembled up to the point that it gets in the way of painting. So his left arm, his head, and his legs are separate from the rest of the body. And then we're going to start off with pre-priming, or pre-coating. So we're going to start off with Pallid Witch Flesh and White Scar White. We're going to basically use a airbrush and spray pretty much everything from a 45-degree angle down with Pallid Witch Flesh. And then we will use White Scar White in a dry brush and dry brush pretty much everything just to pick out the details and such. And then we will go back with Lamian Medium mixed with the White Scar White, and we'll paint it along the edges of the most important, most raised things, like Sylvaner's pads or pieces of his armor, parts of his face and skeletal structure, stuff like that. We want it to stand out. Alright, with Calidor Sky, Daemonid Hide, mixed with Lamian Medium, we're going to be painting his Gene Stealer parts. So with Calidor Sky, diluted with Lamian Medium, sort of 1-to-1-ish, we're going to apply it onto his chitinous right arms. And then with Daemonid Hide, with a little bit of this as well, we're going to apply this into the open fold thingies. I don't know how to describe it, but the alien parts of his arm that's not painted. And because it's diluted, the undercoating is going to shine through easy. Now, with a 1-to-1-ish mix of Dawnstone and Lamian Medium and a little bit of water to help it flow better, we apply it to his, I don't know how to put it, his shin leg pads as well as his armor plate and head thingy. I don't know what it's described. And now with Cadian Flesh Tone mixed around 1-to-1-ish with Pallid Witch Flesh and diluted with Lamian Medium, we're going to apply it onto the skin. And then once we have applied it and dried it, we're then going to put in more water into it to dilute it a bit and apply it as a second tone. This more diluted one is going to help fill out the color and not really ruin the undercoating. I showed it on camera, but I didn't mention it, but the head has a bunch of the Daemonid Hide dilution from earlier onto certain parts in the head as a pre-coating. And now with Lamian Medium and Flesh Terror's Red, we're going to paint the inside of his cloak, which is red. Now I'm going to say this is a mistake. I should have used a lighter one like a Blood Angel's Red or maybe like a Gryph-hound Orange. Because the inside of the cape has no real big folds or stuff like that, I can just get away with doing this since I don't have to make that much distinction. Now with a 1-to-1-ish mix of Lamian Medium and Corvus Black, we're going to apply it to the outside of his cape. And don't forget his left arm also has some cape as well. And we're going to apply this all over. And then once it dries, we're then going to add a bit extra water into it to dilute it further and apply a second coat of the more diluted version onto it, and this will help fill out the color. Alright, now with Magos Purple, Lamian Medium, Cadian Flesh Tone, and Pallid Witch Flesh, we're going to do the face. So what we're going to do is we're going to dilute Magos Purple heavily with Lamian Medium, probably 1 part Magos to 2 parts Lamian, and we're going to apply it all over the forehead. And then we're going to use our previous mix of Cadian Flesh Tone, Pallid Witch Flesh with some Lamian Medium mixed in, and we're going to paint out all the edges of his face, the raised areas and stuff. And what we're going to do is this constant back and forth of layering the paint on his face, then washing everything with the Magos Purple Lamian Medium mix. And then we're going to re-highlight everything again. His facial features are very straightforward, sharp lines in the top of his face and stuff like that. So we keep doing it more and more, and then I highlight less and less area, and so that there's a good color transition. After like 3 or 4 times doing this, I only showed 2 on camera, I believe, I then eventually just take some of the Magos Purple stuff, remixed a little stronger, and apply it into very specific areas where there'd be probably the most shading. And then I did a much lighter mix of Cadian Flesh Tone with more Pallid Witch Flesh on his most prominent features and edges of his face. And yeah, and finally there are some details as far as his eyes and stuff. I couldn't show it on camera because I have to have this thing like right next to my eyes, so I can't really record it. But Pallid Witch Flesh went straight into his eyes to try to make, well, the eyes. I couldn't put a dot in there, there's no way. And as far as his teeth, I used some little Corvus Black to create the mouth area, and then I took White Scar White, and I just, instead of painting, I did tap, 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 tap. So his teeth are just a bunch of taps in there, and it sort of looks like teeth. If you look very closely, you can see that they're very uneven, so he has the worst teeth ever, but you can tell that there's individual spots and gaps in between, so that it looks good at a distance. And then with Temple Guard Blue and a 1-to-1 mix with Lamian Medium, we're going to apply it to his regular pants clothing thing. Alright, now that all the base layers are essentially done, we're going to go on to some oil washes to add depth, shadow, and a certain feel and look to the model. So with black, magenta, red, burnt sienna, French ultramarine, and some mineral spirits, we're going to create washes. So the first big one is, of course, the cape. So we're going to make a thin wash, very thin wash, because black is very strong and pigmented, and we're going to apply it onto his cape. And I made the mistake of letting it dry. I should have applied it and then immediately started wiping it off. I used a hair dryer to rapidly dry off the mineral spirits. The paint caked a little too hard, so a lot of elbow grease was used to remove the proper amounts. Then I used a even further diluted black wash on his armor shin pads thing, and then I immediately started removing with the whatchamacallit, with a sponge, a makeup sponge. And then once that was done, I moved on to his Gene Stealer bits. So I used a mix of the French ultramarine and a little bit of black to make a very dark blue. And then I applied this thinned out wash onto his armor, or his arm, chitin, whatever thingy. So basically what happens is I apply it, and then I remove it with a sponge, and then I apply a second layer again, and then lightly remove it with the sponge. So it built up, the darker areas are much darker, and the lighter areas are a bit lighter, and so there's a nice highlighting, shading stuff going there. I then apply that same mix of blue and black to his pants and wipe away, then add more, then wipe away until I get like a good nice finish around the area. And then I move on to magenta wash, which is very small, and I just applied into his joints on his Gene Stealer arm. And then I use the burnt sienna and applied a thin layer to his skin, wiped away, add a little more. It's a back and forth till I get it right. And so this is to add some yellowish to his skin. I don't do it to his face though. His face remains untouched. His hands are basically what has this. Oh, and the inside of his cape has a mix of the cadmium red and a little bit of black in, and I apply around one layer and then I wipe away, and then I apply a second layer and then wipe away. So if I used a lighter color instead of Flesh Terror's red, it would have been more obvious, the color transition and stuff. So that's where I made a small mistake earlier, but this oil wash, it added some depth to it. And then I do a simple sub-assembly. I assemble his left hand onto it, even though it technically got in the way of a few things, but it wasn't that bad. And then I assembled his legs as well. I didn't do his head yet because I wanted to varnish that properly first. Now we still have quite a ways to go in painting, but I want to protect it now. So with AK Interactive Ultra Matte Varnish, I pretty much varnished the entire model of everything we painted. This is just to protect it from bumps and grinds and me handling it further. Alright, in an attempt to make my bases a little bit better, I'm going to take Liquitex Ceramic Stucco and apply it all over. A lot on the bricks and stuff, and then sort of like a dry brushing technique, applying it onto the metal pieces to be like bits and pieces of dirt and rivets here and there. Alright, with Black Templar's Contrast Paint, Fire Dragon Bright, Uriel Yellow, Warpstone Glow, and Evil Sun Scarlet, we're going to paint a bunch of small details scattered throughout. So first with Black Templar's Contrast, he has these hoses that are all around his armor and stuff. We're going to use this to paint them. It's also on his left arm as well. Then we're going to take Fire Dragon Bright and apply it to these lights that he has on his top right and top left of his head, and I think there's like wire as well that should have this. Then we're going to apply Uriel Yellow into the center of that Fire Dragon Bright as for to simulate the light effects. Then we're going to take Warpstone Glow, and we're going to apply this to this wire he has on his left hand. And we're going to do the same thing with Evil Sun Scarlet. And on his back he has a couple switches and knobs, and you can paint them with whichever one of these colors. I use the green, the red, and I think the yellow as well. Alright, now with Temple Guard Blue and Lamian Medium again, we're going to paint his sword this. After I applied that on in a 1-to-1 mix, I then took my old mix of the oil paint of the Ultramarines Blue mixed with black, and I applied it on. Then I wiped it off, most of it, and then I applied a second coat and did the same thing more sparingly. And it created a nice looking bone blade. And now with Runefang Steel, Liquitex Acrylic Ink Carbon Black, and Liquitex Gloss Varnish, mix them together and create a somewhat dark metal. And then we're going to apply this onto his pistol and several places where there is metal. And then we will go with the Runefang Steel purer, well, not as pure, and apply it onto certain places. We're just highlighting the pistol and places, so there's a dark metal underneath and there's a bright metal over in other places, and the gloss varnish just helps keep it in check and keeps the shine up. Alright, with Cybrite Green and Cabalite Green, we're going to be painting these gems on his sword. Now, highlighting gems is very difficult, and you have to have a lot of precision and a good brush. So we're going to be highlighting in reverse. We're painting the entirety of the gems in Cybrite Green. Then we're doing a 1-to-1 mix of Cybrite and Calibrite Green with a little bit of Lamian Medium to make it a bit transparent, and applying it to 90% of the gems. And then we will take pure Cabalite Green with a little bit of Lamian Medium and apply it into the bottom half middle section of the gem. This is a much easier way of highlighting gems if you do it in reverse, because it's easier to paint big splotches than it is to do that fine highlight edge. Just for me, I guess. And with Xerxes Purple, we're painting his fingernails. Now with Brass Scorpion and Retributor Armor, we're going to paint the little, well, brass pieces that has scattered around. So we're going to start with the base layer of Brass Scorpion. Then we're just going to highlight with a 1-to-1 mix of Brass Scorpion and Retributor Armor, because Retributor Armor is a pretty bright contrast to that, so it's too different. So we have to mix it a little bit together to make the pieces tie in. And now with Mournfang Brown, XV88, and Lamian Medium, we're going to paint his gun holster. So with Mornfang Brown, with a little bit of Lamy and Medium to help it flow better, and a little bit of water, we basically paint the entirety of the holster. Then we do a 1-to-1 of XV88 and Mornfang Brown with the Lamy and Medium and apply to the edges of the holster, big wide lines, and probably some of the parts of the open area. Then we're going to add more XV88 in and apply to the edges. And then we're eventually going to do Pure, still mixed with Lamy and Medium by the way, and put it on the very edges with fine lines. And yeah, the Lamy and Medium basically makes for very smooth transitions and makes the colors blend better. I do a final-ish assembly, and have to say the model is pretty much done, except I completely forgot about the base, which needed to dry, so plan your projects accordingly. I had to wait overnight. I could have completed this entire model in a single sitting, with one video game break, but yeah, plan your projects accordingly. And now with Rise of Rust, this oxide color, and I actually got the wrong pigment there, but it's burnt sienna. We're going to try to make this base look cooler, so I painted it up to my regular standard, or what I've done in the previous versions. So with Rise of Rust, we apply this onto, well, the metal pieces, like sort of a dry brush and picking things here and there. Then we use the oxide color and apply it very sparingly, less is more, on random places. Then we go with the pigment, and then we just brush it on everywhere just to add like some age, maybe some dirt and stuff. And then we seal it in with isopropyl alcohol dropped right in. However, I think I applied a little bit too much because it kind of rinsed most of this away. So the pigment powder basically just did a color change. An overall color tone change. Yeah. And then done. Man, the base really is terrible. That was a poor design on my part. Dang it. Trying to make it work, it just won't. Whatever. Alright, as far as the model goes, because the base is actually dragging it down now, but the model is actually fine. I was able to do this in almost one sitting except for the base. It was a very straightforward project. I did the head much better. This was better than the Magus, or at least I had more control over it this time. I was able to accomplish better than what I wanted. The teeth painted on him came out perfectly. That was just like me just winging it. Everything I'm doing is winging it. The gems on his sword came out great. That reverse highlighting was wonderful. Small details here and there. I mean, this is a pretty solid 8 out of 10 for a simple character, yeah. He's distinct, he's clear on the battlefield, you can clearly see him, spot him, his details are noticeable, his parts are well detailed. Yeah, he's fine. Just 8 out of 10, but overall that base drags him down to a 7. I just don't know what to do to make it better. It was a poor design. I'm trying to go with sort of brick, but part into industry. Yeah, that was disappointing. Well, I can print things very well, but when it comes to bases, it's just like it's a really tough challenge. Well, anyway, more to come, hopefully sooner. I don't play video games much, but what are the odds that 2 games come out back to back, week after week in a row that I really wanted to play, making it really hard to continue the hobby when I really want to be playing. Well, whatever. Alright, so like the video if you like the video, share it if you want to share it, comment if you want to comment, or if you have any ideas how to make this base better. Otherwise, I'm just going to toss the rest of them that I printed. And yeah, I'll be out soon with the rest of the Shadow Throne. Hopefully soon, and I can get back to Age of Sigmar.